Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today we shall discuss about the subject of professional development, and this is lecture number 27, and today we are going to discuss about adult education. The outlines of the lectures are: first of all, we shall introduce the main topic, that is about adult education. Then we shall discuss about the agencies of social education. Then we will discuss scope of adult education, and then principles of adult education, and then adult education in Pakistan, and then conclusions will be there. So first of all, if we introduce the topic adult education, then we can say that an adult is a human being who has attained the age of 21 or say 18 years as specified by law. An adult is considered to be a developed and mature person. In other words, we can say that adult education, that is distinct from the child education, is a practice in which adults engage in systematic and sustained self-educating activities in order to gain new forms of knowledge, skills, attitudes, or values. Adult education, this is practice of teaching and educating adults. And adults education takes place in the workplace through extension, schools, communities, colleges, folk high schools, and lifelong learning centers. It has also been referred to as andragogy. Adult education, we all know that this is distinct from child education. It can mean any form of learning adults engage in beyond traditional schooling, encompassing the basic literacy to personal fulfillment as are lifelong learners. In particular, adult education reflects a specific philosophy about learning and teaching based on the assumptions that adults can and want to learn, that they are able and willing to take responsibility for the learning, and that the learning itself should respond to their needs. So driven by what one needs or want to learn, so the available opportunities and the manner in which one learns. So adult learning is affected by demographics, globalization, and technology. So the learning happens in many ways and in many contexts, just as all adults' lives differ. Adult learning can be in any of the different contexts, like formal. So structured learning that typically takes place in an education or training institutions, usually with a set curriculums and carries credentials. Then the second type or form, that may be non-formal, means learning that is organized by educational institutions but not credential. So non-formal learning opportunities may be provided in a workplace and through the activities of civil society organizations and groups. Then the third type, that may be the informal education. It means that learnings that goes on all the time, resulting from daily life activities related to work and also related to family, community, or layers. For example, community baking class. Then there are some agencies of social, means adult education, that may be categorized as under. For example, the first one, that is teachers, government servants, NSS and other volunteers, social education workers, etc. So any classification of agencies and institutions involved in adult education must necessarily be arbitrary, given the great variety found not only among nations but within single nations. And there are genotypes like the folk high schools, and that is established in Denmark and now found in all Scandinavian countries, or residential schools in which young adults who have completed formal schooling and usually have had some subsequent work experience pursue at least several months of study. So the study uh, that aims may be furthering both moral and intellectual development and instilling an understanding of local and national traditions and conditions. Then the regular educational institutions like schools, colleges, rural colleges, community centers, and agriculture extension groups, workers' educational associations, and voluntary organizations. Non-resident adult education centers, which are the most widely distributed specialized institutes for adult education, are represented by such organizations as workers' academies. And like in different countries, that may be Finland, people high schools in Germany and Australia. So adult education centers are also there in Great Britain and people's universities, the Netherlands, Italy, Switzerland. So the distinguished characteristics of these institutions are that they are independent of the general education authorities, at least in terms of programming, that students' attendance is voluntary and part-time, and that teachers and administrators are either volunteers or professionals offering mainly part-time services. Traditionally, those schools do not prepare students for examinations or offer training in advance and also in vocational skills. So typically, the curriculum include instructions in practical and domestic crafts, fine arts, music, and drama, so familial and social problem solvings, and the modern languages as well as instruction design to reinforce primary and secondary education. So agriculture extension services through almost whole year American development are conducted on a scale great enough to rate separate mentions. Extension Service of the U.S. Department of Agriculture conducts agricultural, home economics, and even public affairs programs in every country in the United States. So it has had special significance in developing demonstration as the method of adult education and in emphasis the adoption of new forming practices. Then other agencies that is informal educational devices like forums, study circles, group discussions, listening groups, and camps. There are different institutions like Open University, the recent that is British institutions is significant for its new dimensions and short break with previous degree programs for adults. And in some educational advanced countries such as Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States, so adults have long had opportunities to pursue the part-time education leading to university degrees. So, but these programs have usually been carbon copies of programs offered to regular undergraduates. So, the Open University in theory at least aspires to a kind of universal higher education. So, it is intended to serve only mature or older adults studying part-time. So it has no standardized entry requirements and attempts to combine various educational technologies and techniques, correspondence instructions, mass communication media, personal counseling, and short-term residential courses. Then recreational educational bodies like theaters, cinemas, clubs, societies, fairs, malls, and Notanki, etc. So, on the basis of commercial enterprises, like they have provided correspondence courses or class instructions like part or full time for adults who are usually seeking some form of vocational qualifications, but who may, however, be simply seeking self improvement. As in speed reading programs, such programs may be licensed or supervised by state agencies like in Sweden and the Netherlands, or they may be self-policing through associations offering accreditations. So some schools or non-profit organizations. Extension services includes both public schools programs for adults and the university extensions mentioned earlier. The school programs are administered by the public school systems, and they are popularly termed night schools because ordinarily they are housed in the same school building used in the daytime for school age youth, and also because some of the same teachers are often involved. So much of the teaching, however, is also done by subject specialists not employed as school teachers, though often originating in efforts to remedy or supplement inadequate childhood education. So many of these programs now cater to the same range of interests served by the non-resident adult education centers cited previously. So they often retain elements of vocational preparation at a less specialized level, generally for younger adults, for example, in commercial and trade skills. Then other agencies, that is institutions whose primary aim is not education, such as religious bodies, the army, parents associations, cooperative societies, and other government departments. Commonwealth countries and uh, former colonial territories has emphasized the provision of non-categories of liberal studies. So the North American traditions found in countries influenced by the United States and Canada places a larger emphasis on credit programs, duplicating courses offered to regular undergraduates. Such programs are offered via televisions or correspondence or in separate urban colleges. Both traditions seems in the process of modification. The British in the direction of offering more credit earning and vocation related refresher courses, the North American toward a wider acceptance of the provision of general level studies for the public at large and for specialized vocational groups. So it is everywhere apparent that universities are assuming more responsibility for the continuous and renewal of education for the highly educated. Then, according to Dockenwald and Merriam, there is a change in time perspective as individuals mature from one of future application of knowledge to immediate application of knowledge. Thus, an adult is more concerned with problem-centered than subject-centered training. In addition to the various schools and services, there are countless organizations whose main purposes may not be the adult education, but that offers some kind of instruction or leisure time activities for adults. So they include such bodies as the Young Men's Christian Associations, the Young Women's Christians Associations, political parties, and labor unions, women's organizations, and temperance organizations. So other agencies for which adult education is related rather than a primary functions are libraries, museums, botanical gardens, and the like. So not only do these agencies provide the means of individual self-education, but also they frequently promote group activities or put their accommodations and resources at the disposal of adult education agencies. So finally, they should be mentioned the advisory and instructional services offered by various social and welfare agencies in the field of health, safety, marital guidance, family planning, and so forth. The central problem in getting adults to learn is motivation. Motivation largely determines the rate of learning. Desires to learn must be aroused by teachers adopting methods appropriate to the situation. So, to learn, the adults must find meanings and significance in the subject matters to be learned. So, lack of literacy need not stands in the way of one's learning. Age is also not a hindering factor, as many have post for tests have shown that throughout life learning ability does not change significantly, as there is no sex differences in the learning power. Now we discuss the scope. What is scope? Educating adults differs from educating children in several ways, given that adults have accumulated knowledge and work experience which can add to the learning experience, and most adult education is voluntary. Therefore, the participants are generally self-motivated unless required to participate by an employer. The practice of adult education is referred to an andragogy to distinguish it from the traditional school-based education. For children pedagogy, unlike children's, adults are seen as more self-directed rather than relying on others for help. So the scope of adult education is very comprehensive. Social education covers all those topics that are not touched by education in general at schools. So topics like religion, politics and family planning can now be discussed with adults who have a mature understanding. Moreover, it aims at giving a new orientation to the outlook of adults to suit the dynamic world. So then the growth grooves of each individual are different from those of the others. So social education harmonizes differences and growth, and it also provides an opportunity for growth to those who have not been able to grow properly or completely earlier. Adults are mature, as we discussed, and therefore have knowledge and have gained life experience which provides them a foundation of learning. An adult's readiness to learn is linked to their needs to have the information. Their orientations to learn is problem-centered rather than subject-centered. So their motivation to learn is internal. So adults frequently apply the knowledge in a practical fashion to learn effectively. So they must have a reasonable expectations that the knowledge they gain will help them further their goals. For example, during the 1990s, many adults, including mostly office workers, enrolled in computer training courses. So these courses would teach basic use of the operating system or specific application software. Because the abstractions governing the user's interactions with the PC were so new, many people who had been working white collar jobs for 10 years or more eventually took such training courses either at their own whim to gain computer skills and thus earn higher pay, or at the behest of their managers. So the purpose of adult education in the form of college or university is distinct. So in these institutions, the aim is typically related to personal growth and development, as well as the occupation and career preparedness. So another goal might be to not only sustain the democratic society, but to even challenge and improve its social structure. So a common problem in adult education in the US is the lack of professional development opportunities for adult educators. So most adult educators come from the other professions and are not well trained to deal with adult learning issues. So most of the positions available in the field are only part-time without any funded by government grants that might last for only a couple of years. However, in some countries which contain the advanced system of adult education, professional development is available through post-secondary institutions and provide professional development through their Ministry of Education or school boards and through non-governmental organizations. In addition, there are programs about adult education for existing and aspiring practitioners offered at various academic levels by universities, colleges, and professional organizations. Now, what are the principles of adult learning as given by Knowles in 1989? First of all, learning of adults must be problem-centered. Then, learning of adults must be experience-centered. And then learning of adults must be meaningful to the learners. And then learner must be free to examine the experience. And then learner must have feedback about progress toward goals. So if we say that if adults are practical, then being practical doesn't mean we all know how to change a tire. That means that as adults, we like to know how things relates to the real world. So most of us are balancing a busy job with family, relationships and all the other grown up stuff. So we don't want to have to rack our brains to work out how training relates to us. It should be clear. Keeping e-learning practical could mean effective use of video to demonstrate how to perform a task or weaving a real life scenario through and cleverly attaching content. So whichever medium you use, be sure to always link theory to its practical applications. And when we say that adults are always goal oriented, it means that as adults we feel the need to learn to solve real life tasks or problems. So it's up to designers to provide meaningful learning experiences. In learning, so I am fan of setting up explorative situations for learners where a goal is stated as and then learners use available resources to solve the problem. And if we say that adults are self-paced, then how can we say that this is thing where we don't want to be told to sit down and complete all our work. At schools, this might have landed us in detention, but not now that we are fully grown, busy bees as adults. So we should have options to self-direct and pace our learnings to fit it around the demands of life. So e-learning has an advantage here because it can be accessed anywhere with the internet connections. So and with the rise of HTML5, e-learning can now be completed on mobile devices. Designers need to respond to this need by structuring learning appropriately. For mobile learning, think bite-sized learning modules, podcast and can be listened to on the move. And the learning that can be completed in multiple visits. So if we talk that adults have life experiences and prior knowledge, so we can say that the baseline, we know stuff and we don't like being treated like we don't know stuff. So adults bring varied life experience and knowledge with them into the learning experiences. So it's more than likely a learner will have had exposure to some of the key concepts in a previous role. So one way to recognize prior learning is using pre-testing to stream contents to the learners, highlighting topics that they may not be competent with and providing encouragement by omitting topics, mock competent interest, self-reflections activities to give learners the opportunity to relate the learning. Adults learn by doing. This is also very important that after all we are just big kids, so we like to learn through play too, explore using gamification and e-learning to bring an element of competition and fun, use interactivity, creativity to set up experiential situations and allow your learners to wander off the linear path and explore. Then adult education in Pakistan. That in Pakistan it has been acclaimed and processed by the government since independence. Several schemes and campaigns have been launched to accelerate the process. This is adult learning. This we can say that simply this is a situation where the adults are pursuing education. So this can be done in a formal setting in higher education, trade schools or apprenticeship. So this can also be done for adults who simply want to learn a skills and pursue education in order to learn that skill. So there are many techniques and theories about how to effectively educate adults specifically, making adults learning an important point of study for many experts. So children and adults are very different when it comes to how they learn. So different techniques must be used in order to make learning effective for adults. Then adult education in India and also in Pakistan is the process to provide education to the adult and aged people who somehow had failed to receive the elementary education during their childhood. And then the effort of providing adult education in Pakistan has been in existence for the past several years, as it is one of the most important things in building an educated nation. Adult education is education aimed at mature students that have already taken part in the workplace. Learning as a mature students gives individuals the chance to gain new skills and expand their knowledge. Our online learning courses are aligned to the national standards to comply with functional skills for adults. From literacy to numeracy, learning online with our programs gives adults a chance to expand their knowledge and skill sets. Adult education can take many forms and cover many different subjects, as well as literacy and numeracy. Many matured age students study languages, sciences, and a range of other important subjects. Adult education in Pakistan. This is mainly provided at high schools. So these are situated in almost all the Pakistani cities and villages. The provision for imparting education has been made at night because most of the people are engaged during the day. Apart from night schools, the government of Pakistan has also set up some libraries so that the adults can study more to become educated, not just literate. Adult education is included among the most important responsibilities of the government, as the eradication of illiteracy has been one of the major national concerns of the government of Pakistan since independence. Social education organizes training centers comprising male and female social education organizers and grassroots levels have also been created. The government has also been established model community centers, rural libraries, colleges, youth clubs, and folk schools for spreading adults' education. The Council for Rural Higher Education was established, and a standing committee on social education was also constituted. The government also started the National Education Center for providing high-level training facilities to the adults. And if we conclude, unless the adults realize the importance of education, they would never understand the need to educate their own children. So education is one of the stepping stones for building a strong nation. Hence, there is a need for promoting adult education on the large scale in the country as a whole. This was all about this lesson. Thank you very much. Take care. Allah Hafiz.